You see, there's something strange about symbols. We think we design them, but often, they design us. The American flag, 13 stripes across a field of impossible blue, wasn't just a banner, it was a line of code written before we even had computers. Each stripe, a data stream of defiance. Each color, a variable in an unfinished experiment called freedom. Think about that for a second. A flag stitched by human hands in 1777 ended up programming an entire civilization's psychology. That's not decoration, that's architecture of belief. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel, and mention where you are watching from in the comments. When I look at it now, I don't just see a national emblem fluttering in solar wind. I see an early prototype of a distributed system, one that said, no single node shall rule the network. 13 separate threads equal, parallel, self-correcting. It was an engineering act, disguised as rebellion. They didn't have the language of systems design back then. But they understood tension, redundancy, load sharing. They built a country the way you build a rocket, with failure tolerance, iterative governance, and a willingness to explode the old world so a new one could reach orbit. Still, the question lingers. What hidden code were they really writing beneath those stripes? The air of the late 18th century was thick with contradiction. The streets of Philadelphia smelled of iron, parchment, and horses. Men spoke of liberty while their boots pressed dust made by enslaved hands. Candles flickered over maps that redrew empires overnight. Ideas raw, electrified, ricocheted between taverns and printing presses faster than governments could censor them. Imagine the noise, quills scratching, drums rolling, the metallic hiss of molten lead poured into bullet molds. The colonies weren't just rebelling against a king, they were rebelling against determinism itself, the notion that destiny belonged to bloodlines. Somewhere amid that storm, a piece of cloth was stretched across a wooden frame. Red, white, blue, 13 stripes. Each stroke deliberate, balanced, mathematical. A visual treaty between chaos and order. They could have chosen 12 or 14, but 13 was risky, a number whispered to be unlucky. Superstition met geometry, and reason won. Those stripes carried the DNA of enlightenment, symmetry, logic, proportion. They spoke in a language older than English, the grammar of structure. When the flag first rose over the battlefield, it wasn't just a signal to soldiers, it was a broadcast to the future. We will organize ourselves. The red was sacrifice, the cost of iteration. The white, purity of purpose, the ideal you never fully reach but must constantly recalibrate toward. The blue, vastness, the frontier mindset, that gravitational pull toward the unknown. You could have walked through a camp of weary revolutionaries and seen it snapping in the wind, light catching the threads like electrical charge. 13 colonies, uneven in wealth, culture, and power, suddenly aligned under a shared pattern. For a moment, human chaos synchronized. They didn't yet know their contradictions would scar generations. The liberty they proclaimed coexisted with bondage, but still, they encoded a possibility. A republic was never meant to be perfect, it was meant to be self-debugging. The flag, with its bands of tension and release, became its first user interface. And as the drums quieted and the new world began to breathe, that cloth, those stripes kept whispering through time. Design is destiny. That's the rhythm I feel whenever I watch rockets lift from a pad, engines weaving symmetrical chaos into thrust. But we'll get to that. For now, pause on the image, 13 stripes, rippling against smoke and dawn, a signal that order can emerge from defiance. What kind of mind imagines such balance amid revolution? When I was a kid in South Africa, I used to stare at the night sky and imagine that space had rules, patterns the way music does. I didn't know it then, but I was trying to read the universe the same way those early Americans read the geometry of their flag. Lines, rhythm, ratios of meaning. Later, when I built Tesla, I realized something strange. The hardest part of creating isn't invention. It's alignment. Getting thousands of people, with thousands of ambitions, to move in harmony toward a single purpose. It's 13 stripes all over again, different minds, same direction. At SpaceX, we learned that failure is information. Rockets explode, but data survives. Turns out, building rockets feels a lot like building republics, except with fewer slaves and more engineers. Each failed launch was its own revolution, a small mutiny against gravity, and every success? A quiet declaration of independence from impossibility itself. The colonies didn't just win a war, they iterated their way out of tyranny. I think about that when a rocket disintegrates at 20 kilometers, how progress often starts in smoke. People see the explosion. I see debugging. Those founders saw rebellion. I see propulsion. The flag's design, 13 balanced forces, mirrors what I try to build every day. A self-correcting system. Whether it's Tesla's neural networks, learning from millions of drivers, or Starlink's constellation adapting in real time, it's all stripes of data, linked, learning, equal in weight, different in role. Even Neuralink carries the same echo. 13 colonies searching for unity, 13 billion neurons searching for consciousness. Both are trying to synchronize chaos into coherence. Humanity's mind is just beginning to see itself as one distributed organism. Maybe that's what the flag was always hinting at, not borders, but bandwidth. You can trace this line across centuries, from cloth to code, from musket fire to rocket fire. The structure repeats itself. Independent modules forming a single intention. Democracy, like engineering, is about feedback loops. If you design it right, error becomes evolution. And yet, I can't ignore the paradox. The same flag that stood for liberty flew over slave ships. The same geometry that symbolized unity excluded millions. It's the same contradiction inside all innovation. Creation always leaves debris. You can't ignite without burning something. When I walked through the first Tesla factory, I felt that duality. The smell of metal and ozone, machines humming like nervous systems. It was beautiful, but imperfect. Every process has its shadow. Every ideal has its inertia. The trick is to keep moving, keep adjusting the variables, until the design approaches something humane. Maybe that's what those 13 stripes really represent, not perfection, but persistence. The willingness to try again, to hold tension without tearing. If you strip away the politics, the flag becomes a fractal of human nature, order, emerging from disagreement. We argue, we collide, we realign. That's not chaos, that's computation. Civilization isn't built by consensus. It's built by the friction between visions. The founders argued about everything: taxation, slavery, representation, but they kept the argument inside the system. That was the brilliance, conflict by design. I think about that when we push toward Mars. People say, why rush? Why risk? But progress is never a straight line. It's a waveform, expansion and collapse, trial and recalibration. The colonies didn't know if they'd survive. SpaceX didn't know if we'd reach orbit. Same principle, 13 stripes, 13 test flights, each one a variable in humanity's long experiment. If you look closely, the flag isn't just history, it's a future blueprint. Its symmetry predicts our networks, our economies, even our planetary ambitions. The idea that distributed cooperation can outthink centralized control, that's the American algorithm, and now it's becoming the human one. But the flag also carries a warning. Structure without purpose is just pattern. Freedom without responsibility becomes noise. As we build AI, as we extend our reach into other worlds, we have to ask, what values are we encoding into our next set of stripes? Maybe Mars will have its own flag someday. 13 stripes of dust and light. A signal that humanity learned how to disagree constructively across planets. Until then, I see the old flag as a reminder that courage can be designed. That ideals, if engineered properly, can survive their creators. That the same geometry that once united farmers and philosophers can still teach us how to synchronize billions of minds across a solar system. So when I stand at a launch pad and feel the engines rumble under my feet, I think of that cloth flapping above revolutionaries 2 centuries ago. The noise is different, but the rhythm is the same: defiance, symmetry, ascent. We take the stars and stripes not as relics, but as blueprints. Liberty was not inherited, it was engineered. 13 stripes, 13 code lines, one operating system called freedom. And the real question isn't whether it still flies, it's whether we still understand the code it carries. Do we still believe in unity as a design principle? Do we still accept failure as the cost of progress? Will we keep debugging our civilization until it finally works, or let the system crash under its own apathy? And if we ever raise a flag on Mars, will we remember the hidden code that started it all?